right, Maya Ellison with NCAA.com. First of all, thank you, Claire and Brandis, for being here. I want to give you all the floor to introduce you all to the audience. If anyone that's new to gymnastics, college gym news, want to give you all that moment to take a time to tell some people, who you all are.
Hi, I'm Brandis Heffner. I'm a co-managing editor at College Gym News. Gymnastics is kind of my life ever since I stopped the sport myself as a child. So just doing what I can to share this beautiful sport with the world.
And I'm Claire Billman. I'm one of the senior editors. I focus on the SEC beat. And like Brandis, I grew up watching gymnastics. I grew up doing gymnastics. Wasn't good, so I quit gymnastics, but still very much had a love for the sport. And this is one of my favorite things. And so like Brandis said, I'm just looking for ways to grow the coverage and the number of fans and let other people know how cool this sport is.
Oh, yeah. You all are the experts, so you all are the best in the business to talk about what we're going to discuss today, which are leotards. For me, I'm just learning about gymnastics, working with NCAA and understanding that things are changing. And there are so many things that have changed over the years. But this is interesting because leotards, and you all can speak on this a little bit more, allow the girls to express themselves, and it's always been like that from the 80s up until now, starting with the bold colors and stripes, ending now with the mesh and the sequins. Talk about how that expression got started, I believe in the 80s.
Yeah. So NCAA started sponsoring the sport in 81. And that was, the 10 years after Title X was passed. So women's sports started having actual budgets, having actual support from their colleges and universities and athletic departments. And so we saw the Leos shift from pretty much just the pragmatic, well, we got to have something we can move in. As they started televising the championships and the meets, hey, this is a way we can get some fan engagement. This is a way we can brand ourselves. And so that really took hold in the 80s.
Yeah, for sure. That's when schools started putting, their school colors on Leos, really branding themselves. It's kind of the OG way of displaying, school spirit. They would pair, their colors with fun geometric designs like triangles going down the Leos. A lot of teams adopted, stripes going vertically or horizontally and, just found ways to express their style, express their school spirit and, get that pride out there.
I want to go into what were some of you all's favorites when we're talking about the 80s. We're talking about those bold colors, those stripes, those circus type colors. We see Georgia. We saw Utah in 1984 with that neon look, kind of throwback to the 70s in a way. What were some of you all's favorite moments that you've seen with those 80s leotards?
I mean, I'm a big fan of Georgia's 1989 championship leotard. It's pretty iconic. It has the big triangle on the side with the bold G logo on there. And it was pretty different from a lot of the stuff that teams were doing in that era. That Leo is so iconic. They actually did a remake of it about 5 years ago, which is pretty cool. Much more bedazzled this time around.
Yeah, for sure. A bit controversial, but I'm definitely a fan of that 1984 Leo from Utah. I feel like some may dig me a little bit because it's not super school spirited. It's not super, Red Rocks or Utah, but I think it was a fun way to incorporate something different, kind of along the same lines of Georgia. It wasn't what everybody was doing every single day. It definitely made them stand out, and that's one thing you want to do.
So now we talk about that bold and expressiveness and we move to the 90s. So you all talked about the spandex, the circus stripes. Now we get into the cute crushed velvet. What did that change look like? Was it something that people were like, whoa, this is a more statement than the 80s? We had the rhinestones, the silhouettes, all of those things. Kind of talk about that transition from the 80s to the 90s.
That transition is right when I started watching the sport. Some of my first memories are the first time I saw a crushed velvet Leo with the high collar. That was just something so different and so unusual. And whoa, I didn't know that we could do that. That's really cool. And then we go into the 90s and Alabama's got like an open front, or Michigan had these big cutouts going all the way down the arms. UCLA would have open backs, which they still do to this day.
Oh, for sure. It seems like, the 80s was all about the bold colors, the school spirit, whereas the 90s were like, oh, we can put a touch of elegance into this. We can, still display Arizona State pride, but we can also look good while we're doing it.
Right.
So then I feel like we've, seen a lot of differences here. People try to be different. They get, the open backs, the cutouts in different places, the switch over to velvet from the spandex. So took a lot more elegant, sophisticated look and, kind of changed the game a little bit.
So now we move on to that memorable aspect, the 2000s, the Mean Girls era. We're talking swirls, mesh, metallics. That transition to the 2000s, we all know the trends. What was the return and the meaning of that more classic silhouette? We talked about that, making a statement in the 90s, but then we saw a trend where they kind of returned to the old days, but put a little twist on it. How was the reaction to the 2000s leotards?
I have mixed feelings about this era because this is when I was a teenager and I know some of the fashion mistakes I made. Yeah, they went really hard with shiny. Just you could not look at a leotard without having holographic fabric, without having metallic fabric. Utah even had a full-on shiny silver warm-up suit. I mean, it looked like they just wrapped themselves in tin foil. And it's unbelievable. And so you see these leotards and they almost look like they're wet or liquid or something because they are so shiny. And that's it. It's just shiny.
Yeah, it kind of seemed as like, these bigger schools got, more coverage about their leotards, got bigger leotard budgets. They just kind of added sparkle and shine wherever they could. It moved from, rhinestones on the Leos to being all the fabric on the Leo being sparkly and shiny.
Okay, I'm getting a sense that this may not be both of you all's favorites in comparison to the 90s.
Definitely not mine, but one thing I do want to point out though is that these leotards, part of the reason they were so shiny and part of the reason teams did favor these fabrics, the TVs weren't very good back then. So, watching in high def, it's really overwhelming. When you were watching on like a tube television, yeah, I mean, you could see like some colors with a little bit of something in there. So it did make some sense. I don't think they've aged well.
I would have to agree. Like I was saying earlier, I feel like the 90s was that change more towards elegance and more towards style. And I think we kind of got away from that a little bit in the 2000s. We went back to like more bold. I want to make a statement with the design. And like Claire was saying, I don't think it was always a successful choice.
No, it's not a classic look. We'll say that. It's very obvious which era these Leos came from.
It's kind of interesting how you look at that whole metallic, kind of not controversial, but very like out there statement piece. And then you move to like 10 years later and you get to the silhouette leotards, the rhinestones. So it kind of seems like, okay, they took this metallic feel, they saw how it performed and went back to the 90s type of leotards, right?
I think they started realizing that using those metallics just a little bit at a time, just a touch of metallic is good. And that we don't have to use that for the entire statement. We can use that as an accent. And I think that was a lot more successful. Teams started playing around more with open backs, open necks, keyhole cutouts again. We saw, for the first time, we really saw strappy designs. UCLA is, I think, the first team that probably jumps to mind. They had a lot of mixed strap elements in their leotards front and back. We would see mesh come into play, more sparkle, and different fabrics being used together. Not velvet as much, but like that mystique holographic fabric and the foils along with the mesh and along with just the flat matte spandex.
And even like taking it back, and I want to ask you all, some of you all's favorite leotards, some of you all's favorite moments throughout all the decades we've talked about. What is your top favorite moment? I know you all were a fan of the inclusivity, the skin tone mesh, but also the bedazzle. What were some of your favorite moments and maybe a little bit about why?
One of my favorite leotards I kind of touched upon earlier was the Utah one, with the silhouette of the skyline and the mountains in the background. Not super rhinestoney, not super sparkly, but I think the contrast between the colors is just so gorgeous. All the girls look great in it. It's easily my favorite.
The Utah Leo was great because it did have a more athletic silhouette, but it incorporated the rhinestones and the team spirit and the ombre. mesh. So it did touch on a lot of those flashier design elements while still being a very athletic design.
Ooh, I'm gonna have to look more. I feel like I'm just a rhinestones glitter type of girl. I just anything with glitter, anything with rhinestones. From the article.
Go,
Oklahoma.
Yep.
yeah, I was going to say, look through
LSU.
the Oklahoma catalog.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
LSU, oh my goodness, they have the sparkle shield. I don't even know what they actually call it, but it's just a fairly plain, simple purple bodice with mesh sleeves, rhinestones covered.
I feel like I don't know. I'm learning so much, but I really appreciate, first of all, you all for explaining the whole leotard to the decades, but also the explanation and the understanding for someone that's even new to collegiate gymnastics, what that truly means, what that has looked like throughout the years. And I hope whoever watches this, they get the same feeling because it's interesting, but it's also amazing to see how far gymnasts have come and where they're going, for decades to come.